when it comes to the day of the contest, I'm his father. He comes to me for advices. So it's not that hard for me to give him the wrong advices.
The funky porno-like theme song for the movie, composed by Michael Small, initially seems at first out of place, but some of its lyrics are prescient, especially the line, "Everybody wants to be bigger than dad." It's a line that relates the eternal struggle for every young man to move out of his father's shadow and become their own man. Bodybuilding is in a sense a form of self-creation that helps drive this process. In an interesting parallel, both Arnold and Lou's fathers were police officers and overbearing figures in both men's lives. Only when Arnold was able to break away and become his own man by leaving Austria could he outgrow his father's influence. Even the little guy in the gym recounts how even though he couldn't be as tall as his dad, he wanted to be as wide as he was, and it clearly shows the common desire for transcendence.
My father's real tall and I'm short, so I want to be, at least if I can't get as tall as he is, I want to be as wide as he was.
Gustav was known for his strict discipline and high expectations for his sons, and he often treated Arnold as the inferior of the two. Arnold's father's friend, aware of Gustav's attitudes towards Arnold, sympathetically referred to Arnold as Cinderella. Gustav's love of discipline was well known among those around him, and from a young age he instilled in his sons the belief that joy and strength could be found through hardship and suffering. Power and victory were of utmost importance. During the week, Arnold and his brother Meinhard were required to wake up early, complete household chores, and fetch milk before going to school. Gustav would also impose military-like strictness on the boys, requiring them to eat with books under their arms to improve their posture. Arnold was deeply afraid of his father and would often become paralyzed with fear when Gustav scolded or questioned him. A source close to the family recalls a scene when, at the age of 10, Arnold went to his father at the police station where he worked only to wet himself out of fear. As a child, Arnold would try to cope with his fear of his father by dressing up in his police uniform and pretending to be him. Weekends were no respite from the competition and discipline, as Gustav would take the boys on outings, but the fear of the upcoming dreaded essay on their experiences cast a dark shadow on the activity. Both boys had to complete a 10-page essay every Monday for grading and approval by Gustav. Mistakes weren't tolerated, and a simple spelling error would have the boys correcting each one 50 times. Gustav encouraged a fierce rivalry between his sons, pitting them against each other in various contests, but would only offer approval and praise to the winner, leaving the loser with nothing but scorn and derision. Every contest began with the pronouncement from Gustav, "Let's see who's the best." Gustav would watch gleefully as the two boys scrambled to outrun, outbox, outski, and outstudy each other, desperate for his father's approval. There was no doubt at all, as Arnold confirmed in later years, that both boys were competing to show their father who was the better son. He would also make the loser acknowledge the winner in front of everybody else, rubbing salt into the wound. This behaviour left Arnold with a lifelong struggle to enjoy any accomplishments, as he couldn't shake off the feeling of inadequacy instilled by his father. The theme of son versus the father is poignant in Arnold's own recounting of his father's passing, as he relates his decision not to attend the funeral due to an upcoming contest.
And it was in a way a sad story when my father died, because my mother called me on the phone and she said, your dad died. And this was exactly 2 months before a contest. She says, "Do you come home to the funeral?" I said, "No, it's too late, he's dead, there's nothing to be done. And I'm sorry, I can't come, and I didn't."
Arnold's rocky personal relationship with his father growing up has been fuel for speculation that this was the tinder that sparked the fire of Arnold's burning obsession with success. Arnold had lived in the shadow of his elder, stronger, better-looking brother Meinhard, who his father favoured and regularly pitted the two brothers off in competitions for his attention. Arnold apparently always came up second best in these exchanges, and Arnold's father apparently often voiced his suspicions regarding whether Arnold was his legitimate child to begin with. So it's not too much of a stretch to assert that Arnold, with all his burning drive and his cold, calculated ambition, years of simmering resentment, could therefore easily provide the justification to skip his father's funeral. The fact that Arnold has also since recounted 3 different excuses as to why he never attended the funeral only highlights the capacity of Arnold to create a revisionist narrative aimed at damage control. So just like the artist that can slap on some clay and create something new, Arnold is as much the sculptor of his own mythology, the creator of his own streamlined media image as he is of his physical body. His girlfriend at the time of his father's passing, Barbara Outland, had been dating Arnold for 6 years and knew him better than anybody. She crystallizes the reality of Arnold's psychology at that time, saying, "When I met him, there was a huge struggle that went on with his father and no desire to see his parents frequently. He felt he had to do it out of his duty, but there was no real loving desire to see his parents. He really didn't feel the obligation about the love of needing to be there. He figured that his mother had the rest of the family there, and there was no warmth Arnold had felt for his father. So to go home to show him that he was going to miss his father, he really felt that his father had sort of abandoned him, and the relationship had already been severed."
And that actually caused one of the greatest conflicts with my girlfriend, because she just looked at me and she said, "It doesn't bother you? I mean, your father died." And I did never talk about it again.
Arnold, in moving to America with just his gym bag, had discovered the American dream, free of his father's assistance or influence. He had made the hero's journey alone and effectively buried his past by severing connections to the old world. As a replacement to his biological father, he had discovered many new surrogate father figures, such as Kurt Manu, Wag Bennett, Joe Weider, Artie Zeller, and Joe Gold, to name a few. In relation to these men, Barbara again stated, they gave him more acknowledgement than his own father did. So in effect, the traumatic memories associated with his biological father were out of sight and out of mind. It's noteworthy that despite his reasons for not attending his father's funeral, Arnold also failed to attend the funeral of his brother Meinhard when he died in a drunk driving accident in 1971. For all his potential, including more raw talent for bodybuilding than Arnold, Meinhard, the golden boy, the fortunate son, had steered his life on a self-destructive trajectory completely opposite to that of Arnold, and he met his untimely death a year before their father Gustav passed away. Likewise, on completion of the film, Lou Ferrigno set straight the real backstory of his father's abusive nature and relationship. "I never wanted to compete in the 75 Mr. Olympia," he says, "but my father saw pumping iron as his opportunity to be a movie star, and he saw me as his vehicle to accomplishing this. We were shown together in the film, whereas in real life, we never trained together at all. He was depicted in the film as being compassionate and caring about my career, whereas in reality, he never gave it a second's thought. After filming, I asked my dad if he wanted to go to the gym with me for a workout. His eyes widened in disbelief. 'What? Are you nuts?' he replied. 'I never want to go to the gym with you again.' That man was a fantasy dad. He didn't exist. In his place was the real dad, who was now filled with rage at the fact that his son was going to lose the contest. When it came time for finals later that night, I would make him look stupid once more for having brought such a loser into the world, and he stood up and said very calmly and coldly, 'Listen, when we get home, I want you to get out and get a real job. I want you out of my house.' Once more, he had seized the opportunity to kick me when I was down and most vulnerable. At 23 years of age, I began to sob uncontrollably. My mother came in and tried to console me, but it was no use. I felt as though my life were doomed, and I cried like a baby." Lou was apparently mortified by his portrayal in the documentary, and he stepped away from the sport to pursue his own acting career when in reality, he might have had the potential to clinch the Olympia title after Arnold's departure. He was to try again with some comeback attempts in 1992, and was pretty much a shoo-in to win the 1994 first ever Masters Olympia when he was beaten by latecomer and another minor character in Pumping Iron, Robbie Robinson. Although it seems inconceivable to anyone involved in bodybuilding from the 1970s until the turn of the millennium, the stranglehold of Joe Weider's monopoly on the sport and the ubiquitous influence and extent of the Weider empire is largely unknown and forgotten by today's generation of bodybuilders. Strangely, very little screen time or commentary is provided about the man behind the organisation, or his role in importing and manufacturing some of its biggest stars. Weider is definitely a father figure the documentary chose to deliberately ignore, or even acknowledge. Weider travelled halfway around the world to import his future star Arnold, who would become the perfect spokesperson for his products and brand. Arnold would be pivotal in unseating the pugnacious Sergio Oliva, who would not toe the Weider party line, and was also unbeatable by Weider's current stable of golden boys such as Larry Scott or Dave Draper. Weider dictated the narrative and perception of bodybuilding through his media and supplement empire. It was through Joe that most, if not all, bodybuilders of the time achieved fame through his contests, magazine covers, and articles. He was the definite kingmaker who monopolized the only game in town by ruthlessly crushing any rivals who offered alternative federations to competitors. It was Weider's often cartoonish portrayal of its biggest stars and the narratives crafted around their personas that shaped and amplified the public's negative perception of bodybuilding at the time. The most likely reason for Butler and Gaines distancing themselves from any Weider association can be attributed to their desire for portraying bodybuilding in a different light, free from all the stereotypes and caricatures. And it wasn't just Butler and Gaines who did this. In furthering his own fledgling career in the mainstream media spotlight, Arnold downplayed his own connection with the Weider circus. He mocked the sales-driven hyperbole in order to downplay the embarrassing association and align himself more with the mainstream he was aiming to seduce. On an appearance on the biggest talk show of the time, The Johnny Carson Show, Arnold discussed his origin story, saying that he came to America alone as a tourist and was discovered on the streets of New York by a producer. He never acknowledged the assistance of Joe Weider to bring him to the USA, either on the show nor in any other interviews at the time. While attempting to promote his Mr. International show to a TV producer, Arnold only had a Weider magazine to show what bodybuilding was about. The TV crew laughed at it so hard that Arnold admitted total embarrassment. He began referring to the bodybuilding magazines as comic books and made every attempt to distance himself from the embarrassing caricature portrayal Weider's magazines had created in the minds of the public. Joe was reportedly hurt that Arnold failed to mention him in any of his public media appearances, and Arnold acknowledged that Joe was both simultaneously the man he most admired and despised more than any other. Once established in the mainstream, Arnold did eventually acknowledge gratitude for Joe Weider, but it again shows the capacity for Arnold to mold the narrative to advantage his own progression at the expense of others. As much as Joe Weider was passionate about the sport, he was also a ruthless businessman. He often took advantage of the bodybuilders in his stable, including Arnold. But Arnold used this time as a willing apprentice to soak up as much knowledge and business acumen under the tutelage of his older, wiser benefactor.
He always would say, Arnold, I want you to be the best and the smartest bodybuilder of the whole world.
There were definite ups and downs as far as Arnold's rocky relationship with Weider is concerned. Nevertheless, both men endured an interdependent relationship that ultimately benefited both over the years.
We always had a lot of fun. The problem with him, he was different than me in some ways. He had a joyful life. He loved to enjoy life. He wouldn't do anything unless there was pleasure involved in it. I was a workhorse, and I just plowed along on my work. I didn't have the pleasure from what I was doing as much as he did.
Ironically or not, Arnold was to eventually father his own son, Joseph Joe Banya, completing the circle of being the surrogate son to Joe and eventual father to his own, albeit illegitimate, offspring.
But the positive is that is what gave me the fire in the belly. So the more you kind of create resistance, the person, the stronger that person gets, and the stronger your character gets, and the more you can endure an end. So for that, I thank the world of what my father did. But I don't think that was maybe the intentions. It was just that he was always kind of a tough guy, a military guy, but he meant so well, and he meant to push me and to make me better in athletics and to make me better in school and to make me better as a person and to always talk about being useful and don't waste your time on just looking at yourself in the mirror in a bodybuilding gym. So he meant well, but the way it came out, the immediate effect was quite different.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think of the themes of fatherhood in the film and the influence that fathers have on our pursuit of bodybuilding or on our lives in general. If you'd like to see more deep dive analysis on some of this old school era content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. All the best.